documentary on roads. It's kind of an odd documentary to take on. We were invited to do this doc with the intention of raising awareness about what Webequie and Marten Falls First Nations opinions were on roads to their communities. You know, we kind of pitched this story and the crew and I celebrated a bit after receiving word it was approved. I was off to Toronto for meetings. I was on my plane, I was dreaming up how I'd make this documentary interesting, a documentary about roads. How do you make roads interesting? And that's when my favorite cousin Chalky Man died. I received the news in Toronto and it hit me hard. I didn't sleep at all that night. When I got to Thunder Bay to visit his mother, I pushed my feelings aside because I was now witnessing a mother grieve her son and my cousins grieving their brother. And it hit me. How were our cousins from Marten Falls going to come down to his funeral? No winter road, $1,000 a plane ticket. And then I realized this wasn't a documentary about roads. It's a documentary about people.
The mineral find, known as the Ring of Fire, is a multi-billion-dollar economic prospect in Northern Ontario.
The Ring of Fire is a highly anticipated mining development in Ontario's far north.
We're talking about a place that's 500 kilometers...
500 kilometers northeast of Thunder Bay.
We're talking about a marriage between economic development and social development.
This is an economic development opportunity in a part of the province that's never seen development before.
Marten Falls and Webequie.
Marten Falls and Webequie.
The next great mining district.
One of the world's richest deposits of chromite, copper, nickel, and platinum.
It's historic news.
$30 to $60 billion.
Northern Ontario is open for business.
To move ahead with what we're calling the corridor to prosperity.
It's a multi-billion-dollar opportunity.
Generations of environmental and social impact.
This is a district that will be developed for over 100 years. 100 years. 100 years.
Is this an engagement session or just a feeling out and getting back into it?
No, we're going to meet with Chief and Council and then have a community information session in the evening. So we're just double checking about the weather. It's fogged in. The James Bay, Hudson Bay coastlines have fog.
Peawanuck, Ange, what are we doing?
We're going to be doing a Chief and Council meeting and perhaps a community meeting talking about the start of the environmental assessment for the Webequie Supply Road.
Mo hasn't been on one of these in a while.
Minute, yeah. Nice
We were up here doing a hockey video, I think the last time you were here.
Yeah, in Webequie. And then before that, I think we came up here for a stop for this, for the roads anyways, at one point.
Action, check that out. We're gonna bring our own internet. Be an hour. Yeah, I'll let you do your meeting.
And then bring the chicken, right?
We got internet. Is that chicken?
You got internet?
Yeah, we have KFC.
Oh, you have KFC? Shit. So, we're up here in Peawanuck, and as an example of what this team does, what do they do?
So part of what we do here as the WSR team is engage communities. So each community is different in terms of how they want to be engaged or consulted with, and we try to follow the local protocol. In this case, they want us to meet Chief and Council first, so we met them, greeted them, and explained our team in our different roles, and outline the process that we're embarking on for the WSR. Interested in hearing their concerns, their issues, any impacts that they want to highlight, what they think may happen, as well as any official information requests.
Road building starts off with an EA, or environmental assessment. It's a massive study that looks at any and all issues on any and all topics that come up, and it attempts to create mitigation strategies. So if a project does move forward, the most successful outcome will take place.
Environmental assessments are used in British Columbia and around the world to identify the impacts of proposed major projects. Knowing both positive and negative impacts is important to identify how effects can be mitigated and to ensure decision makers are informed when deciding if a project should go ahead.
Is it always that simple? Never. There's always political concerns. Whenever there's people involved, there's always going to be differences of opinion. Right now, the staff are meeting with Chief and Council to get permission so that we can do an open house tonight. And at the open house tonight, anyone from the community can come in and give their 2 cents on whether they agree with anything about a road going into this area, whether or not it affects them directly or indirectly. And so this is kind of a unique process, because if you look at, say, White River and Wawa, which are about 100 kilometers away, and those are towns, by the way, for people who don't know this, if there was a mine being developed 20 kilometers outside of Wawa, you wouldn't consult with the community of White River and say, hey, do you mind if we do this road? But with First Nations, you do that. Now, there may be a historical reason for why that is, but it is kind of confusing. And we're going to talk about that. So let's get to the open house. The team has been hired for the environmental assessment, advertised meetings, streaming sessions, and other avenues of contact with First Nations, but it's up to the communities to decide if they want their voice heard or not. Now that does sound straightforward, but there's always historical issues we'll discuss later that have led to communities feeling like this is just lip service anyways.
It's our people that have to decide what's going to happen on our land, on our terms.
My question is, why is the government so heavily vested in this road? What's in it for them?
No, that's a good question. So the question is, why is the government so interested in supporting Webequie in this road project?
It's time to introduce you to the players. One is named Webequie, the other is named Marten Falls First Nation. Let's go over who they are and who they have to consult with. Originally, Webequie wanted to consult with 8 First Nations that surrounded them, but the federal government increased that to 10, and then the province increased it to 22. So all in one breath, Webequie, Weenus, Saskatchewan, Attawapiskat, Fort Albany, Marten Falls, Escondiga, Casabonica, Bumachung, Nabinamik, Arrowland, Causes Lake, Ganigaming, Kitchenamake, Kingfisher, Long Lake 58, Mishkika, Gagaming, North Caribou, Wapakika, Wapakapiwin, Woonamin, and Métis Nation of Ontario, Region 2. So this means Webequie and the Marten Falls project teams for their road projects have to consult and listen to each and every one of these communities' concerns, answer their questions, and try to mitigate it all if the road was ever built and it's illegal. So you kind of know what an EA is now. It's a study before any shovel hits the ground. It's trying to gather information in a neutral manner, blah, blah, blah. Before we go any further, though, we have to know the history of how this moment even came to be. How did we get at the environmental assessment phase?
Our representatives from our First Nations have established a blockade at Cooper Lake.
Webequie First Nation is a First Nation of 800 that is rife with unemployment. The councillors, who in common parlance with the mainstream will be known as the chief's ministers, quote a figure of 90%, or a suicide rate 10 times higher than average, and a lack of access to basics that drive up prices on everything to twice what any average person would pay elsewhere in Canada.
Here is the Copper Lake with Marten Falls people and Webequie people protesting to mining companies here, junior companies who want to be have a say on what's happening here in this area, who want to be the decision makers.
There is no lack of work ethic. It is a lack of real jobs and cash, and this is why these people are erecting barricades preventing any and all companies not willing to sit as equals at their table.
You have to recognize this. This is Indian land.
I did this video when I was a size 32 and had a hard stomach. 12 years ago, a much slimmer me was telling the story of a First Nation who was pushing back against companies occupying their lands illegally. They were prospecting, they were claiming, they were demanding development. Webequie demanded change.
Yeah, so it's been about 15 years since the discovery of the deposits in the Ring of Fire, and Webequie and Marten Falls has been pretty active in that area. So I've been involved on the Webequie side for a number of things on the business development. Initially on the staking rush, so there was over 40 plus junior exploration companies staking at the height of the discovery. I mean, I remember there was like 12, 15 helicopters all the time, field drums coming in.
A lot of helicopters flying all over the place in our territory. There was about 11 helicopters there were based in right here in the business center and the airport, and they didn't. There was a concern, a lack of respect from them. In January 2010, and we planned to go over there, and we contacted Marten Falls and Chief and Council. What's happening and what's going on. They didn't even know what's happening out there either.
There was a protest.
Yeah, and I happen to have filmed it.
Yeah, so in that protest, both Webequie council members and members of the community, as well as Marten Falls First Nations, actually protested the level of activity and their kind of lack of involvement at the time. And so that's when the provincial government started coming in and help facilitating dialogues, not just between the companies, but between the government to government.
And so at that time, I believe in that video, was it KWG who had signed an exploration agreement, and they would later pull out?
No, I think it was Tribute Minerals.
As much as I hate to say it, Michael was right. It was Tribute Minerals.
The confusion of all the names and faces involved, and I believe even Dalton McGuinty, who's a face that no one's talked about politically for a while, had said that this is the next biggest thing, as big as the oil sands, and that, I think, muddled it up a little bit.
Premier Dalton McGuinty was so excited, he even appointed a Ring of Fire coordinator. Wow. And in a very controversial move in 2012, he had a secret meeting with the Prime Minister, seeking help to develop what he called the new oil sands.
Chief Gagnon, that wasn't a formal consultation. It wasn't a decision-making process. It was a heads up and out of respect that this business announcement is going to be made.
I guess I would have to disagree with you in terms of the business case. Obviously, it wasn't just Cliffs. You must have been talking to Cliffs, because obviously Ontario had to invest in some roads, some of the infrastructure that's outlined in the release today. And
the government of Dalton McGuinty took Aboriginal affairs so seriously that Minister Wynne had multiple portfolios, of which Aboriginal affairs was one. The First Nations had to find out about these mining developments, on the news. And it was on their territory. You're just not going to get by like that.
Obviously those discussions have been ongoing with the absence of First Nations, and that's what I'm getting at. When I say meaningful, everybody's got to be at the table, particularly the First Nations, because they're the ones that are impacted by the not only the benefits, but also the potential liabilities of that mine being there.
In May 2012, the finance minister confirmed the government had reached an agreement with Cliffs regarding plans to process chromite in Cape Real. Either the minister was mistaken or this agreement exists.
And in the usually tame mining sector, the controversy was that Dalton McGuinty and his Liberal Party were accused of a secret deal with Cliffs, and most importantly, simply didn't include First Nations in discussions they held behind closed doors with them. Kathleen Wynne even acknowledged this.
The reality is that there were discussions and there were terms of reference for those discussions, but
explosive. Nah, not really. Maybe in mining circles, but I'm just trying to show the salt being thrown in the wounds of First Nation peoples before they were even being brought into talks with anyone. Remember, this was all happening on their territory.
It just really frustrates me that Canada has this perception of us and they don't take the time to come to our communities and sit down with our community leaders, our elders, our workers, our businesses. And to be very clear, there is no one Indigenous voice. We're not homogenous people. We're not a monolith. We've got different values, aspirations, socioeconomic circumstances which drive our decisions in our communities. So in order to actually understand a community, you got to get to a community.
Yeah, so I mean, there was two companies normally. It was Noront and Cliffs Natural Resources, and Cliffs Natural Resources at the time did a sort of almost an expedited feasibility study, and the grade was so high on the chromite deposit that they just said, let's get into the environmental assessments, which they did. That's how confident they were.
That they want a say in the assessment, but they also want it to be Indigenous-led. What would that entail?
They're effectively looking for a direct say in the decision-making of this assessment rather than a consulting role.
As a cabinet minister, the Premier herself went to Cape Creole and announced thousands of jobs. The government said they signed an agreement on behalf of the people of Ontario. Why won't the Premier release the agreement with Cliffs so Ontarians can see whether the Liberals actually lived up to their end of that agreement?
And I'm summarizing really quickly because there is a lot of intertwined topics here. In 2014, Mattawa would sign an MOU on a regional framework agreement. And 9 communities said, hey, you know what? We're going to throw our hats into the ring and we're going to try to work together.
We have not achieved much of the progress on road and infrastructure development that we had hoped for under the Regional Framework Agreement over the past 3 years. While I continue to hope progress can be made, I am prepared to continue to advance discussions with those First Nations that would like to pursue transportation infrastructure through our bilateral process. We need to see meaningful progress in weeks, not months, and I look forward to being updated in the very near future. Kathleen Wynne.
In doing research for this, quite a few people were surprised to hear that a Liberal government made demands like this. Soon after, the government switched to Conservative. The regional process fell apart not only because of Wynne, but Webequie and Marten Falls decided they would simply lead the process and do it alone. Descandiga and Bomatung started raising money before this to fight this, making it a jurisdictional issue with Dana Nadine Scott, a professor at Osgoode Hall, at their side. Webequie and Marten Falls' traditional historical native practices support that it is their land, and they want to work with the surrounding First Nations for their economic benefit. Dana declined an interview. Webequie and Marten Falls were accused of secret closed-door talks, however. This, of course, did not happen, as the only closed-door talks were, in fact, the previous government. Wow, that's a lot. A few short years later, the NDP and Liberals had fundraised off Doug Ford, saying he'd build roads if I have to hop on that bulldozer myself. I'm not doing this to pick sides. I'm doing this to show that a process like this should not be politicized.
So we're talking about a place that's 500 kilometers northeast of Thunder Bay. That's where we're talking about. That is a long way away from southern Ontario. Bruce's First Nations of Marten Falls, you can see that on the map on the sort of in the middle on the right-hand side. And here's all of some of the fact file you're going to want to know on this. This is one of the world's richest deposits of chromite, copper, nickel, and platinum. Estimates say from $30 to $60 billion. That's billion with a B. Could support 5,500 jobs. One of the essential parts of the project is the construction of roads between First Nations, the Ring of Fire, and the provincial highway network. And the Ontario government has now eliminated, as we indicated earlier, the 2014 framework deal among 9 involved First Nations, and the government says it will move forward with bilateral agreements instead. You and I guess a guy named Bob Ray, who I think our viewers know, sat down for a long time and negotiated this regional agreement, which now is no more.
To try to negotiate a framework that would satisfy sort of all the interests and aspirations of the community. I think everybody put their best effort in it.
The First Nations, especially Marten Falls and Webequie, they're the First Nations that have the traditional land use and will be impacted by the Ring of Fire development. They were saying they wanted to have enhanced participation in any environmental assessment that went on for the project. And they wanted to provide traditional knowledge. They just wanted to be involved at a high level.
Webequie would end up having the first route, but I even remember as a kid that there was talk of Marten Falls fighting for roads. And they used to argue it was their territory, historically and traditionally. I remember that as a kid. So they got 2 more routes that may lead into the provincial highway network. So now that we're nowhere closer to understanding what an EA is, let's look at the 3 road routes. There are 3 roads involved that all require environmental assessments. The first is the Marten Falls Community Access Road, or MFCAR, or MFCAR, whatever. It's an access road that goes straight up to Marten Falls. The second, and these are not in order, is the Northern Road Link. It heads straight up to where potential developments are and also connects to the Webequie Supply Road. This road, however, is from the Webequie Airport to the development. Well, when Webequie fought to take part in development and make that decision for their community, they also fought for community access. All 3 roads will graduate out of their EAs to community ratification votes, and then roads may be built.
We're signing a historic agreement with the Webequie and Marten Falls First Nations, and I am incredibly proud and honored to be here on this stage with them for this historic moment for Ontario. We're moving forward with the Northern Road Link.
As you may know, the quality of life is not where it's at with the rest of Canadian society.
Today is an important milestone in the history of Webequie First Nation and for all of Ontario.
We have to start a new relationship with the governments of Canada and Ontario.
We are finally making steps that will change long-term infrastructure on our lands.
We're active participants when resource development. We want to be active participants.
Education, employment, business, and other lifestyle opportunities. In Webequie First Nation, we envision a future where our people will have a better quality of life.
There's a world of opportunity for First Nations, for our partners, our also, our neighbors.
Who better than the people that are going to be living there all year round? We're focused on making sure 2 First Nations communities lead this process, and with their great leadership, we're going to be there to back them up and stand shoulder to shoulder with them.
Wait, what? Shoulder to shoulder? Governments don't use that kind of language. Indigenous-led environmental assessments? What the hell is going on? This was major news and perfect. It was in Toronto, the place to get this news out to the world.
Thanks for taking questions from the media today. I'm sure you'll have questions on this announcement, but I want to ask you 2 quick questions on other big stories. You said consistently during the campaign that you were going to listen to parents. Were the new PC-themed license plates a priority for this government?
Can you tell us from your perspective, what is the actual problem with the new Ontario license plate?
There's been a number of announcements in the last year, whether it's policy announcements on autism, sex ed, e-learning, and now license plates.
Hi, Premier. I have a question for you on the proposed regulations your government wants to bring in on vaping. Considering other provinces like...
You guys, the media, want to stick in this little downtown Toronto bubble and start worrying about little things and disrespect, in my opinion, First Nations right today, when we're supposed to be talking about a historic announcement that's going to change lives for not just the 2 First Nations communities, but First Nations communities and Northerners alike.
With the big budget of my documentary in tow, I invited Alana Downey Baxter to a moderately priced Mediterranean restaurant and offered to pay for apps and most of the bill.
Okay, welcome to dinner, Chez the Media. No, I'm just joking. But yeah, we're having dinner here. Introduce yourself and tell us what you do.
Hey, I'm Alana Downey-Baxter, and I'm one of the representatives on the working group for Marten Falls First Nation. Before we even get on to where the working group is now, maybe we could just go back to how, because the issue is the road and the EA, right? We're talking about the EA, which is for the road. It's nothing to do with the mine. The EA is for the road.
Strictly, yeah.
Yeah, and there is a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of rhetoric and a lot of really unnecessary emotion, I think, about what the community needs and what people think the community should get.
Our chiefs and our communities are very pro-development. It's just that they need to be involved in the initial aspects of how we go towards that step, about protection of our lands, our waters, our rivers and lakes, whatever we have within our territory, and the right for our peoples to practice their traditional practice of whether it's hunting, fishing, etc., or just being on the land. Most of our community, our peoples of the land, they want development to happen. They don't want to be beggars of their lands, but they want to see it according to how the treaty was made, right?
The history of treatment of Indigenous people in our country is not a happy one. What Alan has talked about, the chiefs talked about, is basically working together. And I think the model is partnership. And I'm not the first one to say that, or I hope I won't, and not the last one to say it. But for partnership, you need respect and trust. You can't have trust without respect. And that, I think, is fundamental as a building block. And we cannot just proclaim respect and trust. We have to earn it.
Treaty was a 50-50 opportunity for our peoples. Our ancestors that signed the treaty, they asked questions and they said, well, why is the king coming here to our lands and want us to have a treaty? And here's what we want, they said. We want to be, part of the growing country. And unfortunately, that never happened.
And I don't want to put this on you because it gets to be like this controversial or political thing. I know in the past, and I remember this, you've said you're willing to work with other First Nations, but you got to work with us on our own terms. I'm just curious what your feelings are on your fellow brother First Nations. Maybe making statements, maybe saying things that may or may not be true. I'm not the one to judge that, but there have been some statements said. How do you deal with that, or what's your opinion on that?
Well, it's very disconcerting to us, and when people, other First Nations are making claims on these lands. I know that our philosophy is. It's been said that no one owns the lands, and it's creator given, and that's our philosophy. And even with the treaty and our Aboriginal rights, we're part of Treaty 9 too. It says that in the treaty. We signed the treaty. Marten Falls signed the treaty 1905.
Are you following along? I think you get where I'm headed. Let's go visit Kasim.
So here I am at the offices of Suslop visiting a man that I've been calling Kasim, but his name is actually Kasim. And so he corrected me, and I felt like a bit of an idiot. But he's running the environmental assessment for Marten Falls. Michael Fox is doing it for Webequie. So we're here to ask some simple questions so we can kind of try to wrap our heads around all the stuff that's going on. So let's go inside and visit him, ride the elevator together, and pretend we're all not freaking out because we just came out of a pandemic and we're all going to be smushed into a small box. So we just got told we're not allowed to film, so we're going back up to Suslop's offices. And so we have to tell
Sault to go talk to security. They're also going to escalate it to the police. I don't know why, but... After a brief fight with security, we met with Qasim.
My name is Qasim Sadiq. I'm the principal of Sault. We're a boutique consulting firm. I'm an economist by background. We specialize in working with indigenous communities around economic development, infrastructure planning and development. We've done a ton of sort of policy and research work with communities led by them from coast to coast to coast. And we also advise corporate Canada and governments around policy and strategy. Yeah, so from a development and regulatory process perspective, we're in the middle of leading environmental assessments for 2 different projects. So we've got the Marten Falls Community Access Road, and we've got the Northern Road Link project with Marten Falls First Nation. But those regulatory processes are defined in legislation and law. So Ontario legislation and then the federal legislation as well. But we're on the implementation side. We get our direction from what we call the working group. That is a layer above us of 4 members, 2 from Marten Falls and 2 from Webequie. The 2 Marten Falls members are Lawrence Baxter and Alana Downey Baxter. And we've got 2 Webequie members as well, Roy Spence and Gordon Wabass. And jointly, they work together to sort of think about strategic issues and strategic decisions related to the project. What does the community want to do? What have they heard directly from the community and from leadership? Because they work directly with leadership in both communities to report to them, to inform them of what's going on and to get their input on the process as well. And based on that, they basically tell us what has to be done.
As if we don't care about the land, as if Marten Falls doesn't care about the land, or some other community cares more about their land. Marten Falls, they've always lived on the land. And they have to, and they want to make sure the land is there for everybody, for their kids, for their grandkids, and
that's a good point.
So so that's kind of been something that has been festering for a bit.
So we believe, they have rights, we have rights, but how do we get to a place of reconciliation between ourselves? I don't think our First Nation wants to cause any conflict. We want to work with the First Nations, but we really, are looking at advancing our quality of life in the community. And just like any other First Nation across the land, there's instances of First Nations that have already embarked on economic development. If you look at the Musselwhite mine, if you look at the James Bay Crees on the eastern coast, the Waban Tribal Council and the mines there. So there's First Nations already enacting on their own rights to economic reconciliation and self-determination. So that's all we're doing. And we want to acknowledge that the First Nations have rights, Aboriginal and treaty rights, and they will probably be impacted. I know for sure they will be impacted by development. And is that our place to figure that out all by ourselves? I don't think so. We're just part of the big puzzle.
Right now, and I don't know how the process is going because it's pretty darn warm out, but Marten Falls is having 3 modular, single-family modular homes being brought up over the road. Although they were stuck on the other side of Dryden on Tuesday.
Oh, they're coming. We came up with the other group that brought up modular. They're huge units. They brought up 150 tons or something like that.
They are. I can't speak to that, but I know they're pretty big. And they're also the 4, and this is important too. The 4-unit Teachridge is coming up on the Winter Road as well.
So they must be rushing that because we were just on it, and it was +9 at the turnoff. Webequie and Fort Oak. You're starting to see muskeg.
Thousands demanded a meeting with Ontario Premier Doug Ford. members of the First Nations Land Defense Alliance marched to the provincial legislature to stop mining development on their lands in northern Ontario.
So we arrived at the hotel last night late, and it's about 10 o'clock. We're gonna head into Marten Falls on the winter road. We scouted this earlier. It's gonna be our first trip up. Should be nice. We rented a nice vehicle. It's got all-wheel drive. I got my favorite brands of pop, which I can't reveal. One thing we forgot before we go to Marten Falls is we gotta do some COVID tests. So even though things are opening up, we don't wanna put the community at risk. So there you go, boys. It's one for you. It's one for the camera guy here. And there's one for me. So we're gonna do these tests. All right. It's looking like we're good. Literally a saw. You can get an axe, but this is the ridiculousness of winter roads. If you did get stuck, you just want an axe to cut down a tree, you can still cut down a tree with a saw. I know a lot of people are gonna laugh at us for it, but you gotta take what you can get. Just a bunch of pillows. Is that you, Brando?
That is me.
So we're crossing over the tracks into Airland right now. Our car is beeping, making all kinds of weird noises. I don't know what that means.
Don't be chased down.
Oh, is it? Oh, wow. This thing beeps way too much. So we rented a 2022, I'm not gonna mention the name, but the thing beeps like crazy. So we're heading into Ireland right now. Across the train tracks, and I'm hoping to find someone here to navigate the road with us. And I'm fairly confident on this road because it's a shorter road, the Marten Falls one. The one in Webequie is really, we're gonna have to be really careful with that one, have all our supplies in check. And what happened here, what was it? What did Dan say? It was last year, right?
Well, the winter road is actually extremely dangerous, eh? If you don't know what you're doing and you just happen to go there with no safety equipment. What I mean by that is power saw, axe, blanket, tent even. If you're not carrying on your back, take it with you. Gas, spare gas, stuff like that. You go from Nakina to Marten Falls, it must be about 120 or 130 miles. Eh?
Yep.
And you're going through Muskeg. You're going through the actual really. There's no facilities on the way from Nakina to Marten Falls. There's nothing. There's no stops. Like there's no gas, no coffee.
No coffee shop, yeah.
There's no robins. You know, it's really, and so you have to take everything with you to be safe. I was a security guard on the winter road in Marten Falls, and the police came by and asked me if I seen two young girls come through it, and I said no. We said no. So by the time they found them, one was dead, one froze to death. Eh?
Does it run out of gas?
Run out of gas, and one started walking, and one stayed in the vehicle, and one of them died.
Wow.
See, that's how dangerous it is. If you didn't have no spare clothes, didn't have any survival equipment. It could be like you could fall through the ice. Eh? Like sometimes you hit a hole, and like when you're going across the rivers, eh? And the lakes, they could be extremely dangerous. Like when we went on Skidoo, there was about 4, 5, or 6 of us went on winter road at night, and we got lost. And the person that was leading had just come through, and he was taking us back. So when he was taking us back, he got lost. We went in a big circle all over, trying to find our way back. Eh?
Yeah. Is there a reason why you travel at nighttime sometimes?
It's actually safer.
Yeah.
It's safer to travel by nighttime.
Oh, because less traffic?
Well, you can see the stars. Eh? Just like that.
And the snow is more solid.
Yeah, and snow you can see. But actually, all joking aside, you can follow the stars to where you're going.
People go through the ice. People do die, and I don't think that would be tolerated down south. To be quite blunt. Hey, Doug.
I'm gonna follow you on Winter Road. Yeah. So we found someone who's gonna bring us up. My cousin's gonna bring us up the Winter Road. I've only driven this halfway, and I've done part of some of Nan's territories. I've never done this Winter Road, so I feel more comfortable. My cousin's gonna lead me in the
Can I
the
speak
way.
in native language?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
All right. No. I don't know how to speak. I was just kidding. Hey, nice to see you.
Okay, we'll just follow you up. Okay, sounds good.
Have a nice.
Okay.
Hey guys, don't get left behind, all right?
Yeah, of course, thank you.
Aren't you guys freezing out there?
So we were looking to do a bit of a convoy. I think that word's been perverted, but we wanted to have someone bring us up, and lo and behold, I bumped into my cousin on the Winter Road. He's gonna bring us up, and so we're gonna follow behind him. He's loaded up with all his supplies, gas, food. He's got his family and some of my other cousins on board. Best case scenario, I couldn't imagine I'd bump into my cousin in the middle of nowhere, and he'd be able to bring me up on the Winter Road. So I feel a lot more comfortable now. And so when you're up there teaching, and how do you get in and out? They fly you in, or is that part of it?
Yeah, it's in the summer you have to fly in, but in the winter time there's a winter road when it's open.
So what happens in an emergency? It's just if the flight left for the day, you gotta just wait a full day.
No, they usually call Mediatheque if something serious is happening.
Okay, so it's
Yeah.
a kind of a taxi they'll do for any
Yeah,
type of thing.
chopper comes there, Mediatheque, or the plane comes to pick you up.
Oh, okay.
You know, when you're going to fly patients out and you can't land the plane because of the low hanging clouds, because they need feasibility to see the airstrip, that becomes an issue for the patient that needs medical attention. You know, I remember being our charter couldn't come in, and there was a patient trying to get out, and they couldn't land. They couldn't see the airstrip. So if you had a road, that patient could have been there probably within 10 to 12 hours, getting medical attention that he needed.
I wanted to present a reference for roads, like some basic history to get you up to speed quickly. So I chose Fort William First Nation. And so what happened to the ancestors and people in this area when their locations were opened up?
The earliest, most notable road in this area was probably the Dawson Road, which was surveyed by Simon Dawson in the 1850s, late 1850s. And it was prodded by Western expansionism, but it was ultimately completed primarily for political reasons. So the newly created, or what would soon be the newly created Canada, was facing the prospect of absorbing what used to be the Hudson's Bay Company's fur trade monopoly in Western Canada. And so that was a huge factor. And ultimately, in 1870, the Red River expedition came through this area on their way to the Red River area to quell the rebellion.
Oh, the first roads were used to go squash native rebellions. That complicates the history a little bit. What about, say, roads continuing into today?
In terms of roads, the community was largely isolated in terms of roads up until 1909, when a bridge was completed as stemming from the Grand Trunks developments there. And eventually, of course, that road, or that bridge rather, the James Street Swing Bridge, would become a flashpoint of controversy in much more recent years.
On October 29, 2013, a massive fire ripped through the north end of the St. James Swing Bridge. 1 year later, there is still no resolution in place on how or when the bridge repairs will begin.
I think we'd have to almost pretty well close up.
Jessie Bannon is the owner of J&W Confectionery and Bannon's Gas Bar located on Fort William First Nation. Her business has been running for over 40 years. A poll was conducted recently to determine how the swing bridge closure had impacted their businesses in the area. Numbers have shown that City Road businesses have lost $50,000 per day in sales. All businesses along the road are down by 40% on average, and employment wages have been reduced by up to 40% as well.
Both communities have been financially impacted. The only one that hasn't been financially impacted is CN, and maybe they need to feel what we're feeling.
Hobbs says he won't stand down against the corporation and that CN has big pockets to make the process drawn out. He adds he won't stick Thunder Bay taxpayers with a $3 million repair bill.
Now I know what you're thinking. What does this have to do with environmental assessments or roads? Hear me out, I'm about to get to it.
Do we have a roll? Yeah. We're rolling. Okay, and 1, 2, and 3.
So we have our first lesson. Private companies probably shouldn't own routes providing a service to the public. Just saying. CN, the railroad company, in years where they had record profits, convinced the previous federal government to let them go to court to get a better deal. They didn't want to pay no more. Eventually, they did lose in court, but it shut down access to a road into Fort William First Nation. It may have been a bridge in this case, but a road is no different. If a company owns a road, then they can shut it down when they want, even to get a better deal on things. Second lesson is that business is business. Why wouldn't you want a better deal for your company or community?
It's a historical landmark, and I hope that CN, you will give the children of Fort William First Nation what they wish for this Christmas. Open the James Street Swing Bridge, please.
I chose Fort William First Nation because Thunder Bay, where I live, is located in their territory, and it's part of my 1850 treaty area. Near my actual reservation, roads were historically used for resource exploitation, and while the public may not like to hear it, to also take our territory, force us into residential schools, and deny title to our lands. But we need to look at today, though.
I'm going to go interview Wally Bannon. He owns a store called Bannon's on Fort William First Nation. And this is really how small the native world is. My cousin actually works for him, so conflict of interest. She's the cook there. So I go there and eat, actually, because she's a great cook. Not because I like Wally or anything.
Well, now, when did you build this expansion?
In 1983, 84.
And before that, you said it was just a single building?
It was a house with the garage. At first, it was a detached garage. Then we moved it up.
Oh, wow.
So that we could have, and we added onto that garage so where we had a back part for a games room, and then we were selling the pop and the ice cream and chips and chocolate bars.
Oh, okay.
And that was the start.
Economic development on the res usually starts with gas stations and restaurants, and I suspect the same thing will happen here, followed by big machinery, service jobs, and maintenance jobs.
We had some of our one family member who had gone to culinary school, so we had thought that would be a great opportunity for him to take it and run with it, and so he's developed the menu and all the goods that we serve in there. Pretty popular.
And how many employees does this?
This one has 7.
7. Okay.
And although I knew the numbers already, I asked Dan from his experience working in Marten Falls and Fort Hope First Nations what his recollection of unemployment was in both these roadless communities.
85% people are employed. That's astounding when you think about it.
Most of the jobs would be what, band council and people associated with chief and council?
I think the Great Depression only had, 22%?
22% was, it was devastating. It was like the end of the world, devastated.
Yeah.
People were jumping out of buildings because of 22%.
Yeah.
Not to say it's not bad, but
it's just bad, but...
You know, we have large unemployment rates in the community. You know, the lack of housing has forced the migration of our peoples into large urban centers like Thunder Bay. We're trying to find a way to move forward too as First Nations because we don't like the living conditions in our communities.
So we know that First Nations need to dot their I's and cross their T's when it comes to the structure of public or private roads. We also have a bit of history that most First Nations will recognize as not much different than their own. So now, what are the positives for a community in today's world?
What are some economic opportunities that roads have about your community?
I mean, one of the major economic opportunities that we do have here is Resolute. Resolute is we built that facility. If you look at the highway that goes through our community, the logging trucks that haul the supply of wood into that facility that we own and lease back to Resolute. And you look around our community, we have office complexes, so many people that come and work in our community day in and day out. We have 2 hockey arenas, thousands of cars that travel through our communities every day. And of course, the gas bars that really integrated with the roads.
There's the distinction between communities that are closely connected to larger urban centers, like Fort William First Nation, and indigenous communities that are referred to as the remotes, that do not have all-season road access. But clearly these roads are a key piece to the economic development of the indigenous communities that would be affected directly by these roads. So we talk about suicide crisis, we talk about housing crisis, we talk about a lack of education services, we talk about lack of healthcare services. Part of what those roads will be able to do, if they in fact go forward when the EA is concluded, is to provide similar access to not only the economy that will come from the roads and the economic development, but to all the other services that a city and a hub like the city of Thunder Bay can provide.
But due to the history, the complexities of what has happened to us has to be taken into account. The positives of having jobs and economic development, it means preparing for what enhanced access can also bring.
Yeah, you know what, the hardest part for us is because we're an urban community and you get people integrated or migrate their way into our community, good, bad, or otherwise. So, and we now have security people and trying to make sure that any unwanteds are not allowed in our community. And we try to monitor people coming in. So we make sure that police and our chief and council are dealing with those types of situations on a day in, day out, go forward basis. So they'll face those challenges too once they start having road access, because people will take advantage of our vulnerable people in our communities. So you'll get those dealers and those types of people that just want to make their way into your community. It doesn't matter if you're urban, remote, does not make a difference.
And so we wanted a wide range of opinions. Fort William's had roads for many years, and it's influenced how you've developed, it's influenced who you've become as a First Nation. I was just curious, first of all, what your opinion on roads in your community is, and maybe a pro or con about roads for a First Nation, especially this close to the city.
So I have mixed opinions and mixed feelings about road access to my community. Most of my thoughts on roads are for roads, not against roads. So I guess definitely I feel like the impact that the negative impact that roads have had to Fort William First Nation is that being so close to the city of Thunder Bay, I feel that it has really undermined our language in the community. So we have very few original language speakers that are in the community. And I think that that's been largely because of road access and our proximity to city.
Stay on top of who's coming into your community. Make sure you know who's there, where they're living, and what they're doing.
I think it's really important that if communities are going to have new road access, communities that have never had road access before, this is a great opportunity for them to learn what some of the challenges have been for other communities and kind of try and prevent that.
Okay, so we're at the checkpoint, and they have a band council resolution, so we're gonna have to turn back. So you just check everybody for COVID? Yeah. Okay, no problem. Oh yeah, no problem. Okay, no problem. We didn't know that, so we'll turn back. Yeah, but we. You're not letting him through? No. That's all right. No, it's all right. It's all right.
Test right now.
No, it's band council res. That's all right. That's all right. Hey, don't worry about it, cuz. No, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it, cuz. No, don't worry. Yeah, we'll turn back. Thanks for bringing us up. Thanks for bringing us up. Okay, thanks for giving the Yeah, here. Get some love. Thanks for trying to get me in.
After driving on harsh bush trails to even get on the winter road, one unaccepted COVID test later, and it was time to drive the 2 hours back to the hotel to get a Matawa-sanctioned result. Shit.
So me, the crew, just got a tip that convoy is going to go up. So we're going to extend our trip a day. We're going to go back to, what the hell is that hotel name? Pennox. So we're going to go to Pennox, and we are going to stay. We're going to go into Geraldton, get our test. We're going to go get a hot meal, and then we're going to get up bright and early, and we're going to follow a convoy in. All right, we're going to get our COVID test so we can go to Marten Falls. Come on, boys.
3-hour notice.
Okay, so they probably won't be in first thing in the morning. They'll probably be in 3 hours after you open.
They need to rest because that's what I was told, between Thunder Bay and Marten Falls, it's 7 hours drive, 12 hours drive.
Oh, so they're gonna rest. Yeah, that's what he was saying. Fred was saying that they're gonna stay. The guy over. Okay, that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, how's the report?
So what we're doing right now is we're just gonna get fueled up, all the trucks, then we're gonna get them parked off safely up down the road there. And then we have COVID testing at 12 o'clock. So I'll run in there. I'll probably have to ferry the guys up, just find safe spots to pull over and whatnot. Then we'll go get COVID tests. Hopefully everybody's good. And then we'll continue on into the community from there.
It's explanation time again. What the hell is mushgag? That was mushgag. Well, there's actually two things though we have to talk about when it comes to roads. Mushgag and peat. Mushgag is like this floating living organism that can have water underneath. It's essentially plants. Peat is dense, partially decayed vegetation, and there's no limit to how deep that can be.
Projects, but the winter roads versus ice roads, there's a difference, because a lot of guys say ice roads, you're coming from, like you can test, right? You come from Alberta, you say ice road, it's ice road. This is not an ice road. This is winter road.
Dude, can you explain
from my standpoint, which anybody hop in, but basically the difference is ice road is ice. We might have ice crossings on the way to Marten Falls, which there is, but this is more muskeg, jumping little rivers and jumping little creeks and stuff like that. Whereas ice road truckers or ice road is strictly ice road. Like even ice road truckers, obviously, they do the land parts and the more ice crossings. So it sounds like this trip actually is more one little crossing at the end, for I don't know how many, whatever.
There again, it's a muskeg road, and so they do water it down. And that's my understanding of an ice road. Because without that water and without that buildup of ice, you would never be able to cross. You slip off this ice road or winter road that you sink.
My dad, our dad, used to have a trail that went from behind on the south side of Albany. You cut across the bush and goes up to Marten Falls that way.
We're getting you, Brandon.
You have to have a skidoo trail.
Okay.
That's how they used to travel.
Dog team.
Dog team before the skidoo.
Was it dog team? Yeah. It's like that down here too.
I remember snowshoeing across the Muskeg when I was 4 years old. Little wee snowshoes they threw on us. Okay, start walking. That's what
that's how we used to travel. They didn't have skidoos back then when you were young. They just had dog teams and snowshoes. In the springtime, when you have to travel along the Albany River, they used to pull a boat, and we used to sit inside the boat. In case you break down, in case you'll be on dry land or dry place. Yeah, I remember riding down the Albany on the boat.
Your bag?
Alright.
I'll grab your bag. We'll put these in the room, and then we'll come grab the gear. Was this 3? 2. 2 is apparently ground level in Pickle Lake. So this is 2. So we got mini kits set up in the event anything did happen. It's late in the season for Winter Road, like we're talking end of March, starting to push things. We got kits we can just jump out with so we don't lose our footage. When you fall through this time of year, it's a very slow process. Like everyone gets the idea, it's kind of be like whoosh, it's not. So we have small kits, 2 cameras, some lenses, sound kit. We'll be able to just jump out and sit and wait for someone to come. Probably pull us out would be this thing that happens this time of year. Worst case scenario is the truck goes down and we sit here and at least we got our film. So here's the issue we're facing. It might be really warm today, so we might find ourselves being able to enter parts of the Winter Road, but it might be too smushy because of the temperature. So we're gonna check it out. We might only get a little bit into the Winter Road, and such is life. I'm native, right? So I love this sign. It had to be made, and so someone made it. Bam. But like, could you imagine this sign down south? People would be losing their shit. There'd be a big hole with a net you'd fall in. Okay, I'll stop.
And then here's Tony McGuire's COVID thing.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah, you guys are all good to go. Like I said, I don't know how the roads are or how far it is up there, but there's signs and everything, so you'll see where it is.
Okay, cool. Okay.
All right, guys, have a safe trip.
Thank you very much, man.
Let me explain the native worldview to you super quickly. If a tree falls in the forest and no one is around to hear it, the other trees hear it. Get it?
First started was back in, I can't remember what year, early 90s. Then I was when I first started working on the winter roads. So a lot has changed, like climate change, eh? And back in the day, we used to have, before December, we used to have like 5 feet of ice. But today, we'll barely get 16 inches or, you know.
Oh, wow, really?
You know, like it's climate change, eh?
We just interviewed a Bumtung gentleman who said that it used to be 5 feet of ice in December, and now it's, you know, they're going out on 19 inches, 29 inches, and they're going, okay, this is the best we're getting.
Mm-hmm.
Let's start bringing materials.
Yes, that's what we noticed throughout the years. You know, that the ice is getting thinner, less in diameter every year. Like I think the most we can get now is maybe 35 inches of ice. And if you look at those, I don't know what the weight of those transports are.
50 tons was the one we were following, was 50 tons.
50 tons going and being supported by 36 inches of ice, you know.
There's 5 of them too. So they had distance between them as protocol for safety, but there was 5 50-ton tearing the road up with chains.
Yeah, that's an environmental risk in itself, you know. So, you know, we're very very concerned about that every year, you know, with the possibility of trucks going through the ice, you know, and you know, that would be we don't want to see that happen.
There's 2,800 kilometers of winter roads built each season. In a lot of cases, it's the lifeline of the community in terms of supplies, in terms of housing material. They have to, all the material moves on the winter road because it's a lot cheaper than flying it in. A lot of these flying communities, they're diesel dependent. So they got basically a gen set in the middle of the community, which is their only power source, and in that they have to bring in fuel. And so a lot of the fuel is, moved on the winter roads. When you have to mobilize that much, it's almost like a prioritization exercise. Well, what are we moving on this winter road before it gets all chewed up by the trucks, right?
After arriving, the trucks find the road conditions are way rougher than they thought, and they have to put chains and suck their loads up by getting behind their units and slamming them into their back ends. Is this really the technical talk that truckers use? Sucking up redistributes the load on a transport so that its axis changes, so the front and the back end aren't the heavy points on the vehicle. It could be the middle, so that if the back end gets stuck, the front end keeps driving and will pull it over. While we were waiting, we bumped into an Webequie member who wanted to chat about pricing in their community.
Okay, so we're sitting here with an Webequie member. She was bringing a load up, and so tell me about bringing a load up and why you would bring a load up to...
Because it's cheaper than flying it up.
Yeah. How much is it to fly up?
I don't even know, it's a lot.
Yeah, a lot?
Even like a jerry can, a red jerry can, that's like $80 to $100 up there.
Oh, wow. Oh,
so, yeah, it's expensive, and we're supposed to buy it.
So what do you do the rest of the year when you can't bring stuff up?
We pay it. We have no choice to pay it.
And that's like...
When we work, it's like $1 something a pound.
So you make the same wages, but then you have to pay like 10 times more for everything.
Exactly.
Oh, shit. How do you even get out of the community then if you can't drive out? Like, one plane ticket, you eat up your whole paycheck. How do you live?
Well, usually people depend on NIHP.
Oh, is that the helicopter?
Yeah. No, NIHP is the government, the health system.
Okay.
That has to pay for us to come fly in and out.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you get out like that?
Yeah.
So what do you... So you just go for a doctor's appointment?
Dental, doctor, anything.
So anything to get out?
Yeah. No, it's not anything to get out. We'll get out if we can. Like, look what I'm doing right now, and I'm unemployed. But you know how I make my money? I bake. I bake cheesecakes, pie, everything, and people buy it in the reserve.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm an entrepreneur, man. Fucking right. High five. COVID.
Oh, we tested this one.
Yeah, me too.
Winter roads can best be described as extremely bumpy, up and down constantly with very little grip. The truck in front of us stopped to redo their chains as they lost grip, and soon we were driving alone. We went in about 45 minutes and turned back as the conditions were awful. 6 50-ton transports bringing portable housing up ripped the road to hell. I will tell you, it's a unique feeling when the sun goes down and you're driving on a winter road and there's no stops, there's no service, there's no cell, there's no contact. You go off the road, see you in the morning. It's something else. One drone crash later, 10:30 at night, 15-hour day. It was time to head back. Another 2-hour drive.
So here we are at the 50-kilometer marker. We're at a bridge and there's open water here. This is a late stage of the winter road season. It is slick, there's mud, there's all kinds of stuff. And this is the route inland for many First Nations. So we've just arrived after driving about 4.5 hours. The conditions are really slippery because it's 5 degrees Celsius, and this is the reality of the winter roads. The temperature fluctuates so much that they don't last as long as they used to. So we're Nabinimik and Webequie, 94 kilometers and 174 kilometers respectively down that way. We have Whiskey Jacks flying all over greeting us. It's beautiful, but I wouldn't want to be out on this road if I didn't have a less than stellar vehicle. We have a 2022 GMC Denali. It's a beautiful truck, and we've had slow going, a lot of bumps. We've seen 3 or 4 broken down vehicles. It's just the reality of the winter road system, and everyday people are doing this, and it's great to see trained transport drivers doing this on the daily, bringing up hundreds of thousands of pounds of gear that have to get up to these communities. But I couldn't imagine being a Kokum or bringing up my kids, going to a dentist appointment, getting groceries, even going for a case of beer or something. Like, the chance that you break down and you're stuck out here, we saw 4 cars in 5 hours. Like, that's, and 2 of them were transports. So it is a really big challenge, the fact that people have to drive these roads. And my hat off to anyone who's doing it, because it's something else.
The winter road season this year was one of the shortest on record, and if these communities simply have their roads vanish, I dare everyone to ask, what's your solution? Well, it's time to explain opposing views, past agreements, and parties involved while trying not to piss everyone off, which I'm about to do anyways.
Welcome to Nation to Nation. I'm Brett Forster. Deep beneath the James Bay lowlands in northern Ontario lies a massive deposit of valuable minerals. It's known as the Ring of Fire, and companies have been eager to mine it for more than a decade. The provincial government calls it a once-in-a-century opportunity, but it would occur entirely on the territory of Treaty 9 First Nations.
The concern that we have is a people that the impact on that's going to happen with the AltFF First Nations that lives down the river of the requested mine site.
Attawapiskat entered into an agreement with De Beers for a mine near them. The environmental assessment took into account multiple First Nations issues. Now, personally, I'm a little bit leery about fully government-led environmental assessments on our territories, but it appears largely that nobody really complained too much, and Attawapiskat asked for a few more weeks to consult more before it finished. Now, are these the same kind of projects that'll happen if a road's built? Yep.
Where's the consensus at right now? How many First Nations are for doing this? How many First Nations want to hit the pause button?
Obviously, the 2 First Nations on whose traditional territory the majority of the Ring of Fire
properties are on and the road into the Ring of Fire, Marten Falls and Webequie First Nations are absolutely for it. One of the big, yes, there is the mine development, but something as simple as security of food supply, because these are isolated communities, that's a huge issue for all the isolated communities, including Niskandica and Webequie. Attawapiskat, who had a diamond mine in their backyard, but it was just a 12-year operation and very small, is against it, or it seems to be against it, but at the same time, they're working on their own north-south road along the James Bay coast.
Attawapiskat never had any the benefit out of it. This is my first term as a chief here, and I don't see anything that you know, how our community grow or benefited from the mine.
Past chiefs were worried about jobs leaving the community, as over 100 people were employed at the mine, and also that royalties would stop. Prior to its closure, there was also a trust fund set aside for the community. The reviews of this mine are mixed at best. I think royalties, in my opinion, should always be enhanced when it comes to anything in our territories. And to be fully transparent, it does appear De Beers is trying to use loopholes to avoid doing another environmental assessment about cleanup of the site that is required for any landfill above 200,000 cubic meters.
The elders in the territory have referred to this area as the breathing lands of Mother Earth, because of its significance and what it does for the world in sequestering large amounts of carbon and cooling Mother Earth, you could say.
Now, I don't want to be that guy, but I guess I gotta be that guy. This linkage of carbon sequestration with ancient native knowledge seems a bit political, considering that the breathing lands refers more to the heaving of the land, not to carbon being stored in it. The Mushkegowuk Council is also trying to get a road built into their territory, and it's the same kind of project. In my quest to know more about the North, it just seems like these two First Nations who are leading their own environmental assessments, not federally led by non-Indigenous people, have just seemed to piss everyone off. Everyone's going on the counteroffensive.
New from WCS Wild Audio.
A lot of places in Canada where these mines are proposed happen to be in peatlands.
But a climate face-off in Canada now pits the protection of critical peatlands against the mining of minerals essential to renewable energy.
This summer, a climate face-off in Canada now pits the protection of critical peatlands against...
No, like, seriously though, is this useful? Remember, any good video that's showing Indigenous pitted against mining in Canada or North America, it's got to involve a feather of some sort at the very opening.
If we lose this forest, if we savage the land, we might as well be cutting off our own right hand. For we and the earth are one, under the moon, under the sun.
See, no feather, not as effective. Joking aside, the Sierra Club is saying the Ring of Fire is going to be worse than the oil sands and focuses on roads, and so it's back and forth. What is true? What isn't? Well, let's start with the communities and we'll go from there.
There's a lot of processes going on lately. Maybe tell us about roads and what's going on with in terms of maybe future planning for roads.
Right now, Webequie is a proponent of environmental assessment, and the project is leaning towards or making an all-weather road that would connect to the potential Ring of Fire site.
Pretty reasonable guy, straight to the point, well thought out, doesn't seem evil.
Webequie has a vision, for their community, and we're looking for ways to how to prosper our community, and also to find or address some of the challenges that we have in our community. So we look into economic development, and we look into what's out there that can that can help us, become a community a vibrant community that, that is prospering from using the lands and resources. And one of the things that we're doing is that we're looking at some potential economic development opportunities, including, developing a road to potential sites in mineral development. So we are, exploring opportunities for our community and also looking at our future generation as well too. Connecting to the mainstream society and also to address some of the high cost of living in our communities.
The two communities are working to begin an environmental assessment of these projects by January of next year.
Yeah, what we've been saying is we have to be part of the process. We have to be part of the decision-making process and how the environmental assessment is going to be done. And there is always going to be an opposition group from our people, either from women, young people, and some of the elders. And because if we don't do it right, and they will say it can't go. And that's why today there is a bigger, larger, stronger opposition groups out there, because they look at in the past, when the government made a commitment, promises, and the promises and the commitments become empty.
To talk about how heated things have become, a chief of a First Nation threw my card on the ground. When I get a hold of Dana Scott, who works with Niskanaga, she was actually right cool on the phone, but she didn't want to speak on behalf of Niskanaga. But then Niskanaga sued Ontario over the Ring of Fire that they didn't have, and they're not receiving enough consultation. And when I asked Chris Munoz of Niskanaga, who is like a spokesperson for the community, he refused to talk to me. And is that because his community has gone 10,000 days without drinking water while they're talking about $60 billion deposits, and the federal government never seems to pony up the money to fix these problems? I don't know.
Become empty. They're not doing it they're going to have to be trusted, and it's going to have to be development and decision-making process, and comes from our leadership and decision makers to do it right and to protect the environment, whatever the development will take place on the ground. So we have to fully involved, and if we have to get it done right. Otherwise, there'll be bigger and stronger opposition to the development in the Ring of Fire.
And it's recognized that, quite frankly, nothing is going to happen and without the cooperation and partnership with the Indigenous communities.
Well, I'll just jump right into the thick of it. Your territory, you're trying to make decisions for your territory and for what's right for the people of your community. What would you say to people who are outside your community who are trying to maybe alter that decision? And that could be an environmental group, that could be another First Nation who's saying this is their traditional territory. What would you say to that?
Our community has a lot of potential. I mean, the young people are very well, have a lot of potential in becoming somebody. So what we have to do is we have to look at that and create opportunities for them. And there's a lot of work that is required. There's a lot of things that we have to overcome. There's a lot of social challenges in our community, and we have a lot of programs in our community, but we need to expand to other ways on how we can deal with those challenges that we have in our community.
Now, I'm not trying to pick on any one First Nation or trying to make it seem like these ones are worse than other ones or that this particular group is doing this. These are just examples of the complexities involved in the fight over the Ring of Fire. Another major controversy is who claims land and who can claim land. And while I briefly can state that one of our most sacrosanct Anishinaabe rules was you do not butt into another person's territory, I did ask the chief's perspective.
You've always been a First Nation that's done your own thing. I've always known that even since I was a young man. Marten Falls always did their own thing. You always said we have sovereignty over this portion of land. No one can tell us what to do. And that went back to when Eli was chief. Mm-hmm. You're very independent-minded that way. I'm just curious to see what you to see what you feel about other communities. I don't want to say overextending, but it seems some communities are saying they have sovereignty over what you do in your territory, and this has got to be stopped, and it's not fair. I'm just curious from a person on Marten Falls what they believe.
Yeah, that's something that our First Nation has been grappling with over the number of years, and as our people have said, we've been there since time immemorial, going back to time of our grandfathers and grandmothers, and their grandparents and so on. So we know that by our oral history, and as far as when I talk to my elders, they say that it's our people that have been on that land since time immemorial, and we know that by our stories, and we know that by the names of the rivers and the streams, the creeks, the legends, the islands, the sacred places, the birthplaces of people.
And I know you're not only the chief, I know you're a land user. So how far back does your land use with you and family members go in terms of elders and stories and things like that?
Well, my family, my own family, the Anishinaabe are right there, smack dab right in the Esker camp. That's our traditional land, and I know that because our people are born around that area. I'm born of that area myself, just 25 miles south of Esker camp on High Bank Lake, and so we have a real close connection to the lands there, and we go there every year, and yearly on a seasonal basis to practice our traditional hunting and trapping, and all kinds of other stuff we do throughout the year.
As we begin to wrap up our documentary, we flew back up to Toronto because I had some questions I wanted to ask the study team. I wanted to ask the scientists how they felt about the first Indigenous-led environmental assessment. This process hasn't always favored us in the past, and I just wanted to see them. I wanted to hear what they had to say.
Do you have an idea so the public can get a feel for what would happen if something went up there, or?
Right. A road going through a region like this will certainly have impacts on the species that live there. The impacts can be very different for different species. It might have more far-ranging impacts for some, and just more local impacts for others.
Is there things you could do to mitigate maybe what the community wants, or are there fears about, say, something like caribou or?
As far as mitigating impacts to the road, it's very species dependent, or very dependent on groups of species that use the area in the same way. So that's why we need to do studies that cover a wide range of wildlife species, so that we know how they're using the area, what the impacts can be, and then what we can do to fine-tune how the road is implemented, where it goes, and how it gets used to reduce those impacts for as many species as possible.
A big part of this project is Indigenous knowledge, and we're using that, IK, together with Western science to inform the overall baseline. And it's going to be one of the first times that a project of this magnitude has been integrating IK at the same level of Western science. So we're all really excited about that part and looking forward to the participation of all the communities.
I mean, we said we were going to use post effects to get rid of that outlet, but this is the largest engineering firm in the world, and this is what their outlets look like.
And Angela Brooks earlier, along with John Plaisir, had both mentioned, and I think people would be surprised to hear that the environmental assessment was saying there will be effects, and we will be presenting them, and it's important. We're not trying to hide it. It's just information, and Aaron said through the vegetation, and he said through caribou, obviously there's going to be effects, birds. And I think people kind of get that characterization that an environmental assessment is just a rubber stamp process for a road.
It's the furthest thing from that. It's so comprehensive, and it's a public process. So all along the way, there is input being provided by community members, by special interest groups, by the general public, by people with business interests such as mining companies. All along the way, it's a very comprehensive process, and it is very unbiased.
Other than Don's phone going off in the middle of my documentary shoot, some environmentalists are saying it's going to be like dropping atomic bombs, building roads or any mines up in the north. And I just had to go get an answer. Could that even be true?
And this is more based on the media relating from environmental groups that they feel that if any roads or any development were to go into this area, muskeg and peatlands, it'd be like multiple nuclear bombs. What's the reasoning behind why they would say that? And once again, for lay people, because people have heard it, but they don't really explain that.
Well, I think what they're referring to is the carbon bombs that if you build a road through these areas, it will degrade the peatlands to the point where it will, instead of storing the carbon, it will release it into the atmosphere. I'm not sure that I would call it a bomb. I would say it's more like a slow-moving train that's increasingly releasing more carbon than it's storing, which is equally important. Maybe it's not as catastrophic, but certainly an impact on climate change, and it certainly will drive climate change faster than it is now.
I am unapologetically pro-sovereignty when it comes to Indigenous nations. You know, the history of Canada has been us not being sovereign. But I wanted to balance that with how much damage could things cause, all these arguments from environmentalists. And so I wanted to research what's the footprint of everything and what is it in relation to the size of the peat. And this is going to be controversial. People are going to call me a sellout and they're going to do this and that, but I want to know. So don't get too mad at me. The Victor Diamond Mine, an open pit mine, used about 5,000 hectares. The last quantitative study of how much peat muskeg there is came up to a figure of around 26 million hectares. This is like if you placed a towel on a football field. The road itself will use an extremely conservative estimate of 1,500 hectares or so. It's like placing a hand towel on a football field. And so the engineering methodologies that are out there for roads, I'm not sure if you know a lot about them, but I was just curious. Do you know of any that do limit damage that a First Nation should know about? Is it even possible? And I'm just saying this because engineering firms do in fact say the opposite. And I'm not trying to say that, but I just want to get the information. Is it even possible?
Well, it is possible, but it's extremely costly. I lived in the Yukon and the Northwest Territories. My family, has been in the Yukon for 50 years. And anybody who has lived there knows just how many billions of dollars have been spent trying to fix the Alaska Highway because it's built on rapidly thawing permafrost. There's the road from Inuvik to Tuktoyaktuk, which was just built a few years ago, opened up a few years ago, and it's already sinking because there are really there's no easy way or no easy engineering solution to build a road on top of rapidly thawing permafrost. It just subsides. You think about permafrost it's like an ice cube with a lot of dirt in it. And when you thaw that water out, it just turns into a puddle and things spread out and the water goes in a whole bunch of directions and the road sinks. And that is the problem. That's a huge engineering problem that nobody, as far as I know, has been able to solve.
I like Dr. Edward Struzik. He's very real, and he didn't hold back from me that he'd prefer the North wasn't developed, but that it wasn't so much that it would harm the North, roads and things like that, but that historically and generally, money just was never spent at the values to do it correctly. He saw it where he lived, and he spoke honestly about his experiences. Later on, I did catch wind of the type of road being built, that it was a geogrid allowing water and wildlife to move under it with culverts everywhere. Dr. Struzik had said culverts would have to be placed every 300 feet or so, and the document I saw said they'd be 180 feet in between each one. So I felt better about that. As Indigenous leadership had required the most mitigation for wildlife. Indigenous people had demanded and took on the environmental assessment process. Now the people were feeding what they wanted into the environmental assessment, and they were leading all aspects of how this project of road building would move forward, and we're seeing those results. But I'd still wait and see, and that's my honesty with the history of my country. Don't hate me for that. And I was only left with contradictions. After 1.5 years of research and shooting that started during the COVID dark days, we saw environmentalists declaring carbon bombs about to release. In one newsletter fundraising, I saw analogies that these were like nuclear bombs as a comparison to damage. But climate change was already rushing down from the north due to pollution elsewhere. We saw the politics on all sides that privately I would say isn't always useful, guiding the process and ensuring law firms had steady income. We saw ignorance about what was going on. So many intertwined issues, the least of which seemed to be focused on what was actually happening in actual communities. And I think we saw differing views of reconciliation that sometimes seem to have an outside hand pushing their interests. Would reconciliation be taking the land back and ensuring it remained untouched? Would reconciliation become First Nations guiding and controlling their own economic development? Would it be outside groups defining this process with academic views of what was proper? Which view of history did a person understanding roads and economic development take? That the land was Eden before colonies came, or that we did have complex trade and mind in our territories? Man, I was privy to all the different interests of all the different parties, and being a pure believer in sovereignty, I wondered, would all the people against this even allow the rights of these two First Nations on their reservations to shine through? To me, it was simple. They could do whatever they wanted. We watched Canada do it for nearly 200 years. So while it was simple to me, 2 chiefs, 2 councils, and 2 communities were simply wanting more. Could there be balance between competing interests of growth and, well, balance? So it's in your hands now. But I think this catches you up to what's going on in the Ring of Fire. I didn't play favorites. I'm sorry I only used some of the First Nations as examples. But I was making larger points and generalizing. And honestly, it's become so political, many of them outright refused to talk, yelled at us, and in one final case, we were given the chief's direct number, and he simply didn't answer our number after having their assistant ask us to call them. The point was taken. We tried to be honest to all sides. And so in conclusion, I had a million reasons I was going to bring up zingers. I was in the community for suicides. I was in the city when people from Marten Falls and Webequie died, and I was going to bring up this big shocking conclusion. This is why, and a road would prevent this. And no, I had 20 reasons. But I'm going to pick a really hopeful one, because I think this one's the most meaningful. This is why they want roads.
What do you want to be when you grow up?
A police officer.
Police officer. So Andrew, what do you want to be when you grow up?
A teacher.
A teacher?
Mm-hmm.
Why a teacher?
Huh?
Why a teacher? Do you like your teacher at your school?
Yeah,
Yeah. What's their name?
I forgot.
So, Sonali, what do you want to be when you grow up?
A cop.
What do you do with your family in the summer? What type of activities? What type of games do you play in the summer?
I play cake.
Which one?
I play cake.
Let's try again. Hi, Sunny. What do you want to be when you grow up?
A police.
Police. So what do you do with your family during the summer? What type of activities do you do?
Play games.
Yeah, what type of games?